Join me on how I did everything wrong in this epic tale of how I made this beautiful river table. To start out, I wanted to pick between 3 slabs that were given to me by a friend. This is the one I went with because it revealed some beautiful detail I wanted to emphasize. Alright, let's start getting it cleaned up. You have to clean up any bark, loose or potentially loose pieces that could float or detach later on. Knowing I was going to encase the entire thing in epoxy resin, I wasn't concerned with some of the pieces of bark I might miss. To remove and clean up the bark, the knot, and loose pieces, I used a paint scraper, a wire wheel on my drill, hammer and chisel, and an air hammer. Most people wouldn't probably resort to the air hammer, and I've seen a lot of people use wood chisels, but I used a cold chisel. That seemed like the better choice since I wasn't trying to cut stuff off, just knock loose stuff off. After getting all of it cleaned up the best I could, I actually cut it down so it would go through the planer to even up the widths. I'm just going to use some editing magic instead of showing you all 381 passes it took through the planer. I had several pieces that I was working on until it came time to figure out the actual dimensions and plan for the tabletop. I've had to square up some of it, which turns out wasn't necessary because in the end, I just went with the piece that I already cut off of this one. I guess now I have some other pieces ready for my next one. Now I'm about to dive into creating a custom form. My bright idea was to use corrugated plastic, thinking resin wouldn't stick to it. Little did I remember that the last time I tried this, it didn't stick because I had cleverly covered the plastic with packing tape. Resin won't stick to packing tape. While I lost the footage of taping the form together, that's just a minor detail. The real magic lies in sealing the edges. To ensure a perfect seal, I used silicone caulking on every single edge, even if the tape seemed to have it covered. Trust me, don't rely solely on the packing tape. Once I was confident that the caulking was set and secure, it was time to put the pieces in place and mix up the 2-part epoxy resin for a seal coat on the edges. I used the InvisiClear tabletop epoxy kit, a fantastic option for my first ever tabletop project. InvisiClear is from Fiberglass, a company renowned for their high quality fiberglass products, which I believe is basically epoxy resin reinforced with strips of material. Knowing this gave me confidence that I was using a top-notch brand. I meticulously sealed the knot, stress crack, bug holes, and the feature that I wanted to emphasize, ensuring all these edges wouldn't cause bubbles later on. With a bit of resin left in the cup, I decided to drizzle it down the river path as a filler. I expected it to spread out smoothly, but this stuff is thick and doesn't self-level much. Despite this, the process was fascinating, and I was excited for the final outcome. Whoopsie daisy. Did I just say whoopsie daisy? Guess what I forgot to do? Hit record while pouring the first glorious glug of purple for the river, which is a bummer because the way the purple popped was just magical. Once I realized my epic fail, I made sure to hit that record button and started filling in the imperfections. Yep, as you can see, I'm back at it with Grandma's favorite soup storage bowl. The gnarled? We'll just call it knurled area is going to be clear so it can be emphasized when done instead of blended in with the purple parts. I used to be terrified of epoxy resin because the fumes can be quite dangerous. Resin fumes are no joke, so crack a window or grab a respirator that tackles organic vapors, or hey, why not both? Also remember that heat is a double-edged sword. Warmth is your friend when mixing, and heat can help chase away those pesky bubbles, but too much heat can make it set up way too fast. Like an instant tan gone horribly wrong. We won't talk about how I know about a tan going horribly wrong. And don't forget the gloves to keep it off your skin. Seriously, those are the essential tips for working with resin. Since this isn't deep pour epoxy, I can't pour it all at once, and honestly, I don't trust myself to get it right on the first try, even if I could. I had to play it layer by layer. Mixed, poured, admired, because let's be honest, this stuff is mesmerizing. Repeat, and then the grand finale, a clear coat to top it all off. This was the moment I kept waiting for. The amazing and beautiful... never mind. That was where I started to mess it all up. The bubbles made it look ugly, and I still had a couple of high spots on the walnut that weren't covered in epoxy. Remember when I mentioned I thought epoxy resin wouldn't stick to corrugated plastic? Well, plot twist, it does. Kind of. I ended up wrestling with it for a solid 15 minutes, even bringing out the pry bar to get that stubborn plastic off. The good news? It didn't leave any traces behind. So that was another lesson learned. After peeling it out, I needed to fix the bubbles and high spots, but instead, I managed to make it worse. Way worse. The mistake? Trying to fix it less than 24 hours after the last pour. I started sanding, but it wasn't doing much. So I sanded harder, and still nothing. Then I really went at it, sanding like my life depended on it, but it still wasn't enough. That's when, in a moment of questionable judgment, I decided to bring it outside so I could use the electric planer. But then I had to step away for a little bit. Well, guess what? Big mistake. When I came back, the whole thing had warped from sitting in the sun. And to add insult to injury, the resin cracked in a couple of spots during planing. I'll dive into how I fixed all of these blunders in another video, so stay tuned for that adventure. Alright, after that epic detour with that fiasco, it was time to get back on track. First things first, I gave the whole piece a good rough up with 120 grit sandpaper. Gotta create a nice surface for the next layer to hold on to. Since this epoxy adventure had already taken a few unexpected turns, I decided to ditch the full form idea and just attach the sides directly. Think of it as a streamlined approach. Before adding the sides, I leveled the tabletop and channeled my inner clean freak and wiped the entire piece down with alcohol about 4 times, just to be safe. Unfortunately, the sun had played a bit of a prank on the purple, stealing some of its vibrancy. But a little setback wasn't going to stop me. As I kept cleaning, I could still see the beauty peeking through, and that fueled my fire to get this project finished. Now for the fun part. I generously applied a line of caulking to each side, then carefully pressed the corrugated plastic into place. Think of it as a big hug for the sides. Extra silicone love was added to the corners for ultimate leak prevention, because nobody wants a drippy disaster. I mixed up a healthy dose of Invisiclear tabletop epoxy and poured it on like a waterfall. Just kidding. That would create another bubble disaster. This time, with everything sealed tight, I could go a little thicker to create a smooth, even surface. After waiting a full 24 hours, no impatience this time, I peeled the sides off. After ripping off the sides, I needed to cut the edges to ensure they were smooth, even, and square, and to remove any remaining caulking, and for this, I used my table saw. Back inside, it was sanding time again with 120 grit to prep for the final flood coat. And you guessed it, another thorough wipe down with alcohol to banish all of the dust. Remember, a smooth finish is key. I made sure it was perfectly level and started the flood coat. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the flood coat. I literally flooded the top with Invisiclear, making sure to pay extra attention to the edges for a complete seal. The beauty of this epoxy resin here is that it's thicker, so it could hang onto the sides and soak in a bit, unlike some of the runny resins that just drip right off. For the next 30 minutes, I became a drip-fighting ninja, constantly wiping away any excess from the bottom edge. A little heat treatment helped chase away any pesky bubbles that dared to appear. A few sneaky drips snuck onto the edges, but a quick sanding session took care of those. The bottom might not be red carpet ready, but at least it's smooth. Extra care went into the transparent areas after sanding. I applied a thin layer of UV resin to keep those edges looking smooth and clear. Finally, leg day. This table isn't skipping leg day. I meticulously measured and marked the screw holes for each leg using a square. After drilling screw holes and ensuring the depth was perfect thanks to a handy tape trick, I mixed epoxy resin with purple mica powder to camouflage the screws in the transparent sections. Learning from an earlier oopsie, I ended up mixing a bit too much, so the leftover got poured into a handy silicone mold. I then attached the legs, pushing the screws into the resin and using a small clamp to hold the legs in place while it cured. To avoid scratching the top, I placed some material between the clamp and the surface. This time, I waited 48 hours to ensure the resin with the screws cured enough to handle the pressure when putting the table on its legs. This table, well, it's a testament to perseverance. Mistakes were definitely made, but learning from those mistakes, that's how we improve. Tell me in the comments, where do you think I went wrong? And if you want to see how I brought this back from the brink of disaster, well, you know what to do. Subscribe so you know when that video comes out.